It's a car meditation. Tell you about an experience I just had literally like less than a minute ago. And I'll say this one is about awareness and doing your own research, getting your own data. So, for those who may not know, Charlie Kirk just was quote unquote, assassinated, murdered, slain. And if you don't know who Charlie Kirk is, I'm not going to give you the rundown of who he is. You can, we have this amazing technology these days. You can Google Charlie Kirk. Some of you may have seen his, he's known for his debates. You may have seen his debates with, on college campuses, and you may know that he's, friends with Candace Owens. So I was listening to this, someone talk about, what happened to him and everything. Then they went into the next video was about like his wildest debates. Now, I was familiar with Charlie before this occurred, and I'm one of them people that, you're not just going to tell me something. I'm not going to talk about something I don't know about. I'm not going to, as the old folks used to say, I'm not going to scratch my head unless it itches, and I'm not going to dance unless I hear music. So I, checked out him, and I checked out Candace, and I checked out Ben Shapiro, and, Patrick Bet-David. You gotta, if you want to know what someone is thinking, you gotta listen to what they're saying. You just can't hear little sound bites and clips and think that's their whole entitled, whole story of who they are or what they're discussing. Because I grew up in an era where, you debated and you would watch debates and you would hear both opposing sides. You don't just take one side just because that they on this side. You got to know what the heck they talking about. And sometimes, in the era I grew up in, people would listen to people who they thought they were supposed to vote for or supposed to like, and then find out them people wasn't what for them. So then they would change their perception. But I was riding, and this guy humped his horn, and I heard him talking, so I turned it down. And he said, "Man, I was just listening to that earlier, bruh." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Man, he said, I know what we supposed to be thinking and everything, man." And I said, "Yeah, man." I said, you gotta be aware, man, of, what people want us to think and want us to believe and want somebody, to feel a certain way about a certain thing. And you gotta take on that research for yourself. And not saying that people aren't going to say things that you're going to disagree with, or agree with, no matter what they look like, they're going to say something that you're going to disagree with. But that's the beauty of the country that we live in. You can have an opinion, and your opinion doesn't have to ruin everything. If you have a job or you run a business, I can guarantee you all your people aren't on your side. Everyone you work with doesn't think like you. And some people you may work with may not like you or like what you stand for or like what you believe. And some people that work for you may feel the same way. They may not like you, may not like what you believe, may not like what you stand for. But that's the beauty of the country that we live in, is the fact that you can have an opinion and you can still go on and live your life and be happy and have a family and go on with your life and be successful and do what you want to do. So the fact that this young man was murdered and people want to say negative things, you got to be careful, because when those things happen to people that look like me, and people may have said negative things or thought negative things, we were up in arms too, or we felt a certain way about it. But we'll say this, and I know this from doing my own research, as far as not just reading, but talking to people who lived in that time. When Dr. King was slain, people were very quiet. People were very somber. And if people said things, they said it in the privacy of their home. And if they were ignorant and they felt that he got what he deserved or that should have happened, they said that in the privacy of their own home. They were very quiet. Same thing when it happened to Malcolm X. They were very quiet. Even if they may have felt a certain way, they were very quiet, because they knew that a group of people was hurting. It's a thing when it comes to wars and battles that even your enemy knows when to give them a time of remorse, give them a time of mourning. Medgar Evers, same thing. Kennedy, same thing. Robert Kennedy, same thing. And those times were very basic, black and white. There wasn't no gray, And if you research, you'll find that Robert Kennedy was speaking to a group of black people in a very, very rough area. And he got the word that Dr. King had been murdered. And when the crowd got in an uproar, he calmed them down by saying, heck, my brother was murdered by a white man too. So I understand, and that gave a sense of comfort and empathy, and you can't ask for equality and then when people are being human, take it back to black and white. You got to be careful with that. That's something that we really got to be careful with. So, because the black and white is always going to be there. It's always going to be difference. That's obvious. I look this way, that person looks that way. That's the obvious. But what are we doing to kill the obvious and connect? Because equality is equality. And if I'm asking for equality, regardless of the obvious, then somebody on both sides need to be like, yo, okay, this is our connecting factor, that you breathe air like I breathe air, you drink water like I drink water. Yeah, we got our differences, but if I learn your differences, you learn my differences, we can coexist peacefully. But this young man told me, man, he said, I feel a certain way, but he said, man, and this was a young man. I could visibly tell he was a young man in the car next to me. It wasn't nobody my age, he was younger. And he said, man, human life is human life, bro. And he said, I'd be just as pissed if it was, my favorite rapper, you know what I'm saying? He said, human life, death is death. We should, all the killing need to stop on every side. Black, white, don't matter, you know what I'm saying? I was like, right. He was like, man, he's like, God bless you, brother. God bless you, brother. And we went our ways. But that's what's real right there. That's what's real. That human connection right there. That's what's real. And right now, I'm sure in any city, somebody may be getting murdered, or black on black crime, or quote unquote that black on black crime, or crime in general, murders and violence, anything. But right then and there, that's the human line. That was the equality line right there. And yeah, we look alike. He a little bit darker than me, I'm a little bit lighter than him, or vice versa. But that's that human line right there, that human connection right there of awareness, where it was just two people talking about a situation, not caring about the fact that it was black or white. And you may very well not have liked this person or that person, but you still respect the fact that they're a person and they're a human being. And that, a man having his opinion shouldn't get him killed. And we, of all people, should understand that that's not fair and that's not right. A man can have his opinion. Because if you fast forward and bring someone from our grandparents and our parents' era up to now, a lot of this world is not going to accept them. A lot of this world would disagree. Even people that look like Dr. King or Malcolm X or Medgar Evers will probably disagree with a lot of their views or think they crazy, just like I'm sure it was people back then. So we gotta understand, man, respect people as human beings, respect people as a person, and man, try to stay aware, and most of all, fight for your life. Peace.